You should be ashamed to even stand in a room like this." The words cut through the glittering ballroom, and Emily Carter lowered her eyes as if she had heard nothing. She had learned that trick a long time ago. Keep your voice soft. Keep your head down. Never give wealthy people a reason to remember your name. Tonight, she was only a waitress in a borrowed black uniform, carrying silver trays through a room where one dinner cost more than she could earn in a month. The chandeliers above her scattered warm light across polished marble, crystal glasses, and expensive gowns. Emily's white skin looked almost colorless beneath the harsh glow, and a loose strand of brown hair had fallen across her cheek after 8 exhausting hours on her feet. Her shoes pinched with every step. Her rent was due Friday. Her checking account held $47.62. Still, she kept moving. "Table 12, her supervisor whispered sharply. "And try not to embarrass us again." Emily nodded and picked up another tray. She had barely reached the table when a silver-haired woman laughed loudly. "Is this really the staff they hired?" A few guests smiled. Someone murmured that Emily looked like she belonged outside, not inside a place like this. She felt the familiar heat rise in her face, but she swallowed it. She had endured worse words. She had endured long shifts, unpaid bills, and nights when dinner meant half a sandwich saved from work. She could survive a few cruel people. What she didn't know was that someone powerful had been watching her for the last 20 minutes. At the far end of the ballroom sat Alexander Blackwood. No one approached his table without permission. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his pale skin almost porcelain beneath the chandelier light, and his dark hair was brushed neatly away from a face that seemed carved from winter. His expression never changed. His gray eyes moved across the room with quiet precision. Most guests knew him as the mysterious billionaire behind Blackwood Holdings. Almost no one knew the truth. Alexander was older than the city itself. He was a vampire king. Emily had no idea. She only noticed him because, unlike everyone else, he wasn't. Laughing. When another guest made a cruel comment about her cheap shoes, Emily gave a small, polite smile and continued serving. Then the man at the table reached for her tray, deliberately making her stop. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Emily slowly raised her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir." "Sorry." He smiled. "That's all you have." A few people laughed again. Emily's fingers tightened around the tray. She could feel every eye in the room. She wanted to disappear, but she refused to cry. She took one breath. Then another. "Your order is ready, sir." She turned away. Behind her, Alexander's hand stopped moving. His eyes settled on Emily for the first time with something deeper than curiosity. Respect. Then the laughter began again. And this time, Alexander slowly looked up. The castle had never felt so quiet. After everything that had happened the night before, the silence seemed almost deliberate, as if the ancient halls were waiting for someone to speak first. Adrian stood beside the tall window of the western tower, watching the first pale light spread across the mountains. For centuries, he had believed that dawn was simply another part of a world he no longer belonged to. But this morning felt different. Somewhere beyond those distant peaks was the answer he had been searching for, and for the first time, he was willing to leave the safety of the castle to find it. Behind him, Elena entered the room carrying the old silver key they had discovered beneath the library floor. She did not need to explain why she had come. Adrian could see the question in her expression. What had the key opened? And why had his name been written beside it in a language neither of them recognized? They returned to the library before sunrise had fully arrived. The hidden doorway was still there, concealed behind a wall of books that had remained untouched for generations. Elena placed the key into the small lock beneath the stone frame. Nothing happened at first. Then a soft glow appeared along the edges of the doorway, revealing symbols carved into the stone. Adrian stepped closer, and one symbol suddenly changed. It formed the shape of a crown. Elena looked at him. Adrian felt a strange warmth in his chest, something he had not experienced since he was young. The doorway opened into a narrow passage leading beneath the castle. Unlike the rest of the fortress, this place did not feel abandoned. Small lamps along the walls began to illuminate one after another as they moved forward. At the end of the passage stood a circular chamber with a single table in the center. On the table was a leather-bound journal. Adrian recognized the handwriting immediately. It belonged to his father, a man he had believed lost to history long ago. With trembling hands, he opened the journal. The first pages contained familiar family records, but deeper inside, the writing became more personal. His father had discovered that the royal bloodline carried an ancient responsibility, one that had been hidden from the kingdom for generations. The crown Adrian inherited was never meant to represent power. It was meant to protect a secret. Elena read the final entry aloud. It revealed that someone had deliberately erased part of the family history, and that the missing pages had been taken beyond the northern border. Adrian closed the journal and looked toward the passage behind them. For the first time, he understood why the mysterious visitor had warned him not to trust the stories he had been told. His past had not disappeared. Someone had hidden it. And now, with the first light of morning touching the castle walls, Adrian knew where he had to go next. North, toward the forgotten kingdom beyond the mountains, where the missing pages were waiting and where the truth about his family had survived in silence. By noon, Adrian and Elena had left the castle behind, following the old mountain road toward the northern border. The journey was quiet at first, but neither of them could forget what they had discovered beneath the library. Adrian carried his father's journal inside his coat, while Elena kept the silver key close to her. They had only traveled for several hours when the familiar road disappeared beneath a layer of mist. The mountains ahead seemed closer than they had from the castle, their dark peaks rising above the clouds like silent guardians. Elena stopped beside a weathered stone marker. A faded crown was carved into its surface, identical to the symbol they had seen beneath the castle. Adrian placed his hand against the stone, and the mist began to move. A narrow trail appeared between the trees. It was not marked on any map. They followed it until they reached a small village hidden in the valley. The houses were old but carefully maintained, and warm light filled the windows even though the afternoon was still young. The moment Adrian entered the village square, the people became unusually quiet. An elderly woman stepped forward from the doorway of a small stone house. She looked at Adrian for several seconds before whispering his name. Adrian had never met her, yet she spoke as if she had been waiting for him. She invited them inside and placed an old wooden box on the table. From beneath a folded piece of cloth, she removed several yellowed pages. Adrian immediately recognized the handwriting. They were the missing pages from his father's journal. His heart filled with questions, but the woman raised one hand. She explained that the pages had been protected by her family for decades because Adrian's father had trusted them with a secret that could not be revealed until Adrian was ready. According to the pages, the forgotten kingdom beyond the mountains had not truly vanished. Its people had simply chosen to live apart from the outside world. They had guarded an ancient sanctuary where the first rulers of Adrian's bloodline had once made a promise. The promise was not about wealth, conquest, or royal power. It was about balance. The crown was meant to serve as a symbol of that promise, and every ruler was expected to protect it without seeking recognition. But Adrian's father had discovered something troubling. Someone within the royal court had been secretly searching for the sanctuary, hoping to use its ancient knowledge for personal ambition. That discovery had forced him to hide the truth and send the missing pages away. Adrian slowly realized that his father had not abandoned his family. He had been protecting them. Elena gently placed her hand over the journal. The elderly woman then revealed one final detail. The path to the Forgotten Kingdom would open only once every 100 years, during the first full moon after the northern winter began. Adrian looked toward the window. Outside, the sky was already changing. The journey had brought them farther than he expected, but the real destination was still ahead. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the sanctuary was waiting for the next guardian of the crown. The full moon was still several nights away, giving Adrian and Elena only a short time to prepare for the final part of their journey. They remained in the hidden village while the elderly woman explained everything she knew about the Forgotten Kingdom. According to the old records, the entrance to the sanctuary appeared only at a precise moment, when moonlight reached a certain stone arch beyond the northern ridge. If they arrived too early, they would find nothing but mountains and snow. If they arrived too late, the path would remain hidden for another 100 years. Adrian spent the next morning studying his father's missing pages. One passage caught his attention. It described a symbol that would appear on the ground when the sanctuary was ready to receive its guardian. The symbol was a circle surrounding a small crown, exactly like the mark Adrian had seen beneath the castle. Elena noticed something else. The pages mentioned a second person who would accompany the guardian, someone chosen not by royal blood but by trust. Adrian looked at her, and neither of them needed to say what they were thinking. Their journey had already brought them too far to turn back now. As evening approached, they left the village and climbed toward the northern ridge. The air grew colder with every mile, and the trail became narrower. Yet there was something peaceful about the mountains. Snow covered the distant slopes, reflecting the last light of the setting sun. Adrian had spent much of his life believing that his family history was a burden he could never escape. Now he began to understand that knowing the truth did not mean carrying the past forever. It meant choosing what to do with it. Near midnight, they reached a wide plateau surrounded by towering cliffs. At its center stood the stone arch described in the journal. Nothing seemed unusual about it. Elena walked around the structure, searching for any sign of an entrance. Adrian opened the journal again, but before he could read another line, the silver key in Elena's hand began to glow softly. A circle of light appeared beneath their feet. Within it, the ancient crown symbol slowly formed in the snow. Adrian stepped forward. The mountains seemed to become completely silent. Then a voice came from somewhere beyond the arch. It was calm, familiar, and filled with a warmth Adrian had not heard since childhood. It spoke his name. Adrian froze. Elena looked at him with surprise. The voice belonged to his father. But according to every record Adrian had ever known, his father had disappeared many years ago. The stone arch began to shimmer, revealing a distant landscape beyond it. There were tall towers, quiet gardens, and countless lights scattered across a valley hidden from the modern world. Adrian stared through the opening, unable to understand what he was seeing. His father's voice came once more, telling him that the truth he had searched for was waiting on the other side. Adrian took a slow breath and reached for Elena's hand. Together, they stepped toward the forgotten kingdom, unaware that someone else had been watching from the mountains above, waiting for the sanctuary to open again. The moment Adrian and Elena crossed the stone arch, the cold mountain air disappeared behind them. They found themselves standing on a quiet road surrounded by silver trees and fields covered in soft snow. Far in the distance, the hidden kingdom rose beneath a sky filled with stars. Its towers were unlike anything Adrian had ever seen. They were elegant and ancient, illuminated by hundreds of warm lights that made the entire valley seem untouched by time. Elena looked back, but the stone arch had already vanished. Only a smooth wall of snow remained where the passage had been. Adrian opened his father's journal, hoping to find an explanation, but the pages had changed. New words had appeared beneath the final entry, written in the same familiar handwriting. They told Adrian to follow the road toward the central tower and trust the person who had traveled beside him. Elena read the message over his shoulder, then smiled gently. For the first time since they had left the castle, Adrian felt certain that his father had planned for this moment. As they approached the kingdom, they noticed that the people were not surprised to see them. Instead, villagers stepped quietly from their homes and watched Adrian with expressions of recognition. Some bowed their heads. Others simply smiled. It was as though an entire community had been waiting for him to return. At the center of the kingdom stood a magnificent palace surrounded by gardens covered in frost. The main doors opened before Adrian touched them. Inside, a long hall stretched beneath a ceiling painted with scenes from the history of his family. Adrian walked slowly beneath the paintings, noticing details he had never been taught. His ancestors had not ruled this hidden kingdom through fear or wealth. They had served as guardians, protecting knowledge that had been passed from one generation to another. Then Adrian saw a painting that stopped him completely. It showed his father standing beside a young woman. Elena recognized the woman immediately. She was the same elderly woman who had protected the missing journal pages. Adrian stared at the painting, realizing that his father had known the village and its people long before Adrian was born. A quiet voice came from the far end of the hall. Adrian turned, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. His father was there. He looked older than Adrian remembered, but his eyes were exactly the same. Adrian could not find the words to speak. His father simply smiled and walked toward him. He explained that he had remained in the hidden kingdom because leaving would have placed the sanctuary at risk. He had spent years preparing for the day Adrian would discover the truth on his own. But there was one final secret he had never written in the journal. The ancient sanctuary was not only a place of protection. It was also a place of choice. Adrian was now the next guardian, but he did not have to accept the crown. His father looked at Elena, then back at his son, and told Adrian that the future of the Hidden Kingdom would depend not on what he inherited, but on what he chose. Outside, the first light of morning appeared above the mountains. Adrian looked toward the distant valley and finally understood that his journey had never been about reclaiming a forgotten throne. It had been about discovering who he was when no one else could decide his path for him. Adrian stood beneath the painted ceiling, still trying to understand the truth his father had revealed. The Hidden Kingdom had waited for him for years, yet no one demanded that he become its guardian. Instead, his father led him and Elena through a quiet corridor toward a circular chamber beneath the palace. At its center stood a simple stone pedestal holding an ancient crown. It was smaller than Adrian expected, without jewels or decoration, and its simplicity made it seem more important rather than less. His father explained that every guardian had faced the same decision. The crown could be accepted, but only by someone who understood that leadership was a responsibility rather than a privilege. Adrian looked at Elena. She reminded him that he had spent his entire journey searching for answers, but now he had to decide what those answers meant. Before Adrian could respond, a bell sounded somewhere beyond the palace walls. His father became unusually serious. The sound meant that the sanctuary had recognized a change in the outside world. Someone had discovered the northern passage. Adrian remembered the mysterious figure he had sensed on the mountain before entering the kingdom. His father confirmed his fear. The person watching from the ridge had not been searching for the kingdom by accident. They had been following the clues Adrian and Elena had uncovered. Yet his father did not ask Adrian to hide. Instead, he took Adrian to a large window overlooking the valley. The Hidden Kingdom was peaceful, but its people were already gathering in the central square. They knew that the old era was ending. Adrian realized that remaining hidden forever would only allow the same secrets to repeat themselves. He asked his father why the kingdom had stayed apart from the world for so long. His father explained that secrecy had once protected them, but the world had changed. The sanctuary could no longer remain isolated simply because previous generations were afraid of what might happen if its existence became known. Adrian finally understood the meaning behind the ancient promise. The Guardian was not supposed to protect the kingdom from the world. The Guardian was supposed to protect the truth from being forgotten. He approached the stone pedestal and placed his hand beside the crown without taking it. He told his father that he would accept the responsibility, but he would not rule from a throne. He would become a guardian who listened, learned, and allowed others to have a voice in the future of the kingdom. Elena smiled, knowing that Adrian had finally made the choice his father had hoped he would make. Suddenly, the crown began to glow softly. Light spread across the chamber and formed the same ancient symbol they had seen beneath the castle. Then the palace walls seemed to echo with a distant sound, like a door opening somewhere far below. His father looked toward the floor. There was one final chamber beneath the sanctuary, a place even he had never entered. The crown had not chosen Adrian merely to preserve the past. It had awakened something that had been waiting beneath the kingdom for generations. Adrian and Elena exchanged a determined glance. Their journey had brought them to the heart of the mystery, but the deepest secret was still hidden below them. The sound beneath the sanctuary grew louder, not with danger, but with the deep resonance of something ancient awakening after a very long sleep. Adrian stood beside Elena and his father, watching the stone floor slowly reveal a circular staircase that descended into darkness. His father had never seen this chamber before, yet something in his expression told Adrian that he understood why it had appeared now. The three of them began their descent, following a soft golden light that appeared along the walls with every step. The staircase seemed to continue far beneath the palace, deeper than Adrian had imagined possible. After several minutes, they reached a vast underground chamber. At its center was a still pool surrounded by hundreds of small stone tablets. Each tablet carried a name, a date, and a single sentence describing a promise made by a previous guardian. Adrian walked slowly around the pool, reading the words. Some promises were about protecting knowledge. Others were about preserving peace between distant communities. One simply said that a guardian must never allow fear to become the reason for a decision. Elena noticed a final tablet standing apart from the others. Unlike the rest, it carried no name. Instead, It displayed the crown symbol and a message that had been waiting for the next guardian. Adrian touched the tablet, and the surface became clear like glass. An image appeared within it. He saw the castle where he had grown up, the library, the hidden passage, and the road that had brought him north. Then he saw something unexpected. The mysterious figure who had followed them through the mountains was standing inside the castle library. But the figure was not searching for the sanctuary. They were protecting it. Adrian looked at his father in confusion. His father explained that the Hidden Kingdom had always maintained a small network of guardians beyond its borders. Their purpose was to watch for anyone who might discover the sanctuary for the wrong reasons, while quietly guiding those who were ready to understand its purpose. The person Adrian had feared was actually one of those guardians. Suddenly, the image changed. It showed the kingdom from above, surrounded by a vast landscape that seemed to extend far beyond the mountains. More hidden settlements appeared in the distance, each connected by faint lines of light. Adrian realized that the Forgotten Kingdom was not the only secret community protected by the ancient promise. There were others. Elena looked at him with wonder. Their journey had revealed only one part of a much larger world. Then the final message appeared on the tablet. It explained that the old system of guardians had reached its final chapter. The next guardian would not be chosen to continue the same traditions. Instead, Adrian would be expected to unite the scattered communities and create a new agreement based on trust rather than secrecy. His father lowered his eyes, realizing that this was the reason he had been asked to wait so many years. Adrian looked across the chamber and understood that the crown had never been calling him to inherit the past. It had been calling him to change the future. Above them, the first morning light reached the highest towers of the Hidden Kingdom. Adrian turned toward Elena and his father. For the first time, none of them felt trapped by the secrets they had uncovered. They finally understood what came next. The journey was no longer about finding the Forgotten Kingdom. It was about helping the Forgotten Kingdoms find one another. By the following evening, Adrian had made his decision. He would not remain in the Hidden Kingdom and wait for the old traditions to guide him. If the scattered communities truly existed beyond the mountains, he needed to find them before fear and isolation could separate them forever. Elena agreed to travel with him, while his father promised to remain in the sanctuary and prepare the people for the changes ahead. Before Adrian left, his father gave him a small compass unlike any ordinary instrument. Its needle did not point north. Instead, it moved toward the nearest community connected to the ancient promise. The first destination lay several hundred miles west, beyond a forest that had not appeared on any modern map. Adrian placed the compass inside his coat, and Elena secured the journal in her travel bag. At sunrise, they left the palace through the eastern gate. The people of the Hidden Kingdom gathered in the square to watch them depart. There were no grand ceremonies and no formal speeches. Adrian simply looked back once, seeing his father standing beneath the palace entrance. His father raised one hand in farewell, and Adrian understood that their relationship had changed. They were no longer separated by unanswered questions. They were connected by a shared purpose. The road beyond the kingdom led into a vast forest covered in morning mist. For several hours, they followed the compass through narrow trails and quiet valleys. Along the way, they discovered small signs of other travelers. A carved crown appeared on a tree. A circle of stones marked a hidden spring. A wooden bridge carried the same ancient symbol they had seen beneath the castle. Each discovery made the larger world feel closer. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing where an abandoned stone observatory stood beneath the trees. The compass needle pointed directly toward it. Inside, Adrian found a circular table covered with maps. Unlike the maps in his father's journal, these showed territories far beyond the northern mountains. Each hidden community was marked by a different symbol, and thin lines connected them all to the sanctuary. Elena noticed that several symbols had recently been illuminated. Someone else had already begun searching for the communities. Adrian studied the map carefully and recognized one location. It was the same place mentioned in the final pages of his father's journal, a coastal settlement nearly 300 miles away. Before they could leave, a voice came from the doorway. It was the mysterious guardian who had watched them from the mountains. The guardian introduced herself as Mara and explained that she had protected Adrian's family for many years. She had followed them because the path ahead was too important to face alone. Mara revealed that the old agreement between the hidden communities was beginning to weaken, and only a new guardian could restore it. But there was another problem. One community had already stopped answering the sanctuary's messages. Adrian looked at the map and understood what that meant. Their next journey would take them to the coast, where an entire hidden settlement had disappeared from the network. As evening settled over the forest, Adrian closed the map and looked toward the distant horizon. The mystery was no longer contained within one castle, one family, or one forgotten kingdom. It had become a story shared by many people, and Adrian was finally beginning to understand why his father had trusted him with the future.